so we'll start with chapter 1 and video 1, and remember, if you haven't gotten your worksheet out yet, you want to go ahead and stop and get the worksheet out so that you can fill it out as you go through the slides. It'll help you in the long run. So before we can talk about what is happening with U.S. history, we have to get people over here. And there are a lot of different theories for how people ended up in this part of the world. A lot of theories have credibility to them and some don't. But what seems to be the most credible is that these are folks who are coming from the Middle East and following herds, or running away from bad weather, or of any variety of reasons, that they are traveling across Asia and then coming over the Bering Strait, which might have been land bridge, might have been ice, might have been water, and then coming into North America, in through Russia, what is today Alaska, down through Canada, into North America, into what today is the United States, into Central America and South America. And this is taking a really long, long period of time for the people to get all the way through. There are some other theories about how people may have gotten here to this hemisphere. There are theories about Asians coming across the Arctic Circle. There are some other archaeological finds that indicate maybe people had come by sea earlier than this initial theory, the first theory I talked about. But generally speaking, people tend to believe that this is the path that people took to get into today, where we see indigenous peoples, the folks we call Native Americans and so forth. This is how they're arriving. So when you see the Native Americans in North America, you see a variety of cultures developing there. You see smaller tribes that are more scattered about through North America. You see them migrating a little bit more. You do see some with villages, some with farms. So as I said, there's a greater variety. When you start going further south into Central America, this is where you see the Mayans and then the Aztecs developing. Go even further south into South America. You have the Incas, who developed their civilization in the Andes Mountains and so forth. And these civilizations are particularly impressive when you consider that they didn't have resources that European civilizations are going to have first. And it's any variety of things. Like, they're not going to have the same weapons that Europeans will have when they arrive here. They're developing these civilizations without iron, without horses. Horses are not indigenous to North America. And so they're developing these civilizations without those tools. Then we need to look at why then Europeans are going to want to come, take that very dangerous trip across the Atlantic Ocean and come and explore what might be out there. And I know that you've heard, Columbus thought that is the only one who thought that the Earth was round, but he was not. So why are folks leaving Europe and venturing out? There are a vast number of reasons for why this might be. And we're just touching on a few, and we're touching on them very lightly. When things stabilized a little bit more in Europe, that meant that you had the luxury of wanting to learn things. And with that, then you start wondering more. If you're not worried about where your next meal is going to be, if that's not your main focus of your day, then you can start thinking about other things. That stability in Europe comes in part due to the development of new nation states, where we're easing away from some of the older ideas of kingdoms and easing a little bit more toward the idea of a nation state. Not completely there, but moving in that direction. You see greater population growth in Europe in that time period as a result of some of that stability. And then there will be folks interested in land that didn't feel like they had access to land. Religion is going to be a factor. In some instances, it is a push factor. We'll talk about pilgrims and so forth coming over here to avoid persecution in Europe. In some ways, throughout our history, it's been a pull factor for folks coming over here. Different materials and inventions have been developed also, which will give people the confidence to feel like they can get on a boat and sail across the Atlantic to see what's over there, and feel better about it. Throw in a little greed, a little conquest, some racism, some slavery, mix it all in a pot, and you have folks exploring. So you're most familiar with Columbus, so we'll talk about him. Columbus did have his trips financed by Ferdinand and Isabella. There will be 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria from Schoolhouse Rock. 87 men are going to leave Europe in August of 1492 and sail that ocean blue. They will end up in a number of places. We have a map on the next slide of where all he went on 4 different journeys over here. There was interest in finding gold and interest in just seeing who is here, what is here, and so forth. And then Columbus will take some of the people that are found here, he will take them home with him. So you see here on this map where Columbus went. I'll draw your attention to the fact that he does not at any point go to North America. I think a lot of times we assume Columbus, sailed right into Savannah or something like that, and he does not. He stays here in the lower Caribbean. So Columbus is at times referred to as a successful failure in that he does discover a new world, but he never realizes it. He never fully understands that that is where he is. He goes to his death thinking he is actually way across the Pacific in the East Indies. There are a lot of opinions also about the effect that his discovery and his travels had on Indians, Native Americans. And you see that controversy every October with Columbus Day. There are people who protest celebrating Columbus because of the effect that him coming over here leads to. And actually it will be Amerigo Vespucci who will have a better understanding of what Columbus has discovered, and this new world is going to be named for him. This is a graphic organizer to bring some ideas to you in a kind of different way, and we'll use these at times throughout the semester. But what this is talking about is what's called the Columbian Exchange. So you have to use your imagination a little bit and think back to a time when there weren't magazines and TV and so forth, no Animal Planet or any of that, and think what it must have been like to be Europeans come over to this new world and see all these new things that you absolutely never had an idea it existed. So for example, the Native Americans had iguana. Can you imagine getting off a boat and walking around and seeing an iguana? Flying squirrels, which would freak me out, catfish, rattlesnakes, imagine being the one to discover a rattlesnake. Bison, cougars, armadillos, possums, sloths, anacondas. Anacondas. You get off this boat from Europe and you're walking along and there's an anaconda. Toucans, condors, hummingbirds. I don't think we're terribly afraid of hummingbirds. But you see all these things. The Europeans had horses and cattle, pigs, sheep, and goats that the Native Americans had not seen before. The Native Americans had corn and potatoes and beans and peanuts and all these different items, even down to the items that could give you chocolate and marijuana. The Europeans, for their turn, have rice, wheat, barley, and oats, and wine, grapes, so their sort of naughty contribution to the New World is going to be beer and wine, whereas the Native Americans had the pot. And then you have coffee, thank heavens, olives, bananas, bluegrass, and so forth. The Native Americans had syphilis, the gift that keeps on giving, and the Europeans are going to take that home with them. But the Europeans gave the Native Americans things like smallpox and typhus and diphtheria and bubonic plague, malaria and yellow fever and cholera and a lot of other things like that. So where the Native Americans perhaps enjoyed the giving of their disease a little bit more than the Europeans are going to do much, much more damage with theirs because they were so much more airborne. That wraps up video 1. So look for now chapter 1, video 2.